Hello, my name is John Rose, and in part 7 of this video series, I'd like to start putting the pieces to this puzzle together. And so far, I've shown you 4 pieces that I want you to be sure you are aware of, and they all have to do with the Trivium and Quadrivium deception. This is where controlled opposition infiltrates the truth movement, especially the health movement. We have to understand the truth has enemies. So the very first piece of the puzzle I showed you guys was Paul, a Roman agent, infiltrated the Essene movement. He attacked raw food and promoted meat eating. That was in parts 1 and 2. That's the first piece of the puzzle you need to be aware of. The second piece you need to be aware of is that raw food heals. It gets rid of most of our illnesses and ill behaviors. And I illustrated that with the works of Drs. Albert Schweitzer and Max Gerson. We have to understand that cooked food is the fall of mankind. If you don't understand that, nothing else is going to make any sense. The third piece of the puzzle that I showed you guys is that the Trivium method must not be working very well because John Irving, one of the main guys promoting this, doesn't know the truth. So what I want to do in this video series is take the good from the Trivium and get rid of the bad, like Joe Wallach, for example, that only focuses on deficiencies, and he also promotes meat eating. The fourth piece of the puzzle would be the last 2 parts we looked at, where Dr. Weston Price's work is used to confuse an already confused public. And now what we want to do is take a closer look at the Trivium, our threefold path to truth. And we're going to begin with a 5-page summary on the Tragedy and Hope website, and this comes from page 3, where they say that we have to be able to entertain various ideas without necessarily embracing them. We have to have an open mind. We got to free ourselves from our opinions and prejudices. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, and this is going to be a flaw and one reason why it doesn't work. On the same page, they also talk about the law of causality. An entity must act in accordance with its nature. Once again, if you don't have the right truth, you're not going to realize we have a species-specific diet, and then you're going to use a mistake as an excuse to keep making the mistake. Of course, the key here about the law of causality is that there are 3 ways to screw up the law of cause and effect, and I did a special video on that, and I'll include that in the description box down below. Now, this is where it gets really interesting on that 5-page summary. On page 4, they come out and say the system, the Trivium, has 3 parts. 1, general grammar, discovering and arranging knowledge. 2, formal logic, fully understand the knowledge. And 3, rhetoric, you got to be able to express it. So when you look at rhetoric, use book 3, chapter 7 in Aristotle's Rhetoric by Aristotle. And then for the grammar and the formal logic, use my special teaching tool, the ultimate schematic, especially for the formal fallacies. And then you can use my 3-step process for the in-formal fallacies. As Buckminster Fuller once said, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. My friends, the Trivium is not that tool. The tool is a special tool I created so that I could arrange knowledge. You see, I found the most valuable knowledge in the world over 26 years ago, and I went out looking for all the other pieces of the puzzle. and I'm good at putting things together. I'm a typologist. I even have my formal education is in that. And I've created this special tool, and I started with the cause and effect, pleasure and pain quadrant system. Now, this is really important to understand, my friends, because every one of us are living systems, and we're subject to the law of cause and effect, and our brains are wired for pleasure and pain. So every one of us are born with these 2 forms of 2-value logic. And when you look at cause and effect, you have to understand, again, there are 3 ways to screw up the law of cause and effect, and you really won't understand that unless you understand that there are 3 stages of knowledge. Where knowledge is acquired in the first stage, applied in the second stage, and manifested in the third stage. So what we have here, folks, is thoughts, actions, reactions, beliefs, causes, effects, belief system, lifestyle choices, feedback system, the things we think in the first stage of knowledge, the things we do or have done to us in the second stage of knowledge, and the things we get in the third stage of knowledge. And when we look at what we got, those problems are either 100% within our control or not 100% within our control. So now when you come down and look at my special teaching tool, the ultimate schematic, you'll see that it's really a 6-box system. And every box logically connects. Every box has an ordered pair and a polar opposite, and is going to logically connect to all of its adjacent boxes. And altogether there are 18 connections, or 18 portals. So that means that there are 24 places that we can put knowledge in. Again, what's the first thing we have to do? We have to arrange knowledge. Well, if we don't want to get confused, we want to be able to put all that knowledge in the appropriate places. And that's the purpose of my special teaching tool, is so that we can arrange the knowledge and then find the invalid structure. Remember, when we use logic, there's 2 tests that we must pass. And that has to do with the fallacies. There are formal fallacies and informal fallacies. The formal fallacies have to do with the structure. It has to do with the first test. And this is the easiest of all tests to take. The second test has to do with the specifics, or the contents, or the details. And this is where it gets confusing, and this is where all the logical fallacies come into play. So if we take a look at Jan Irving's website, for example, we see that he talks about logical fallacies, and I put in parentheses what he has after formal and informal. So what you see in parentheses, that's me coming back and saying formal fallacies is where we're talking about the structure. It has to be valid. Monus ponens, that's the only one we have to really worry about. And then the informal fallacies, that's the contents, that's the details, that's the logical fallacies. This is where we don't want to get stuck at. And when you look at the links that Jan Irving provides on his website, he only has 3 links, 3 that are for informal only. Here's 42, the most common ones. Here are 90, and here's some more audio. And then here's a group that has formal and informal. But when you look at this link, they don't include monus ponens. So if you're going to solve problems, my friends, we got to keep things simple. We want to look at our problems and put them in either the category where they are 100% within our control or they're not 100% within our control. We only want to focus on those that are 100% within our control based on the things we do. And what we don't want to do is look at the logical fallacies in systems with invalid structures. Now, if we take a closer look at my special teaching tool, I've identified 281 pieces altogether, but I've only assigned 120 of those pieces whole numbers. If we go to the very end of this section, you'll notice that I have 8 ways that we use the wrong approach. The biggest way we use the wrong approach is 8.1. We use the wrong approach when we expect systems to solve problems that only we can solve. We think the experts that are only experts in 104, problems outside of control, are actually the solutions for those problems within our control, 103, and that's not true. But the piece number I'm talking about right now would be piece 8.2. We use the wrong approach when we look for logical fallacies in systems with invalid structures. We don't want to do that, my friends. That's how it gets complicated. This is how we get lost down rabbit holes. You don't go identifying the effects for a problem that's within our control. Because what we want to do is go back to the second stage of knowledge and look at what we're doing. And what you're going to find out is most of our problems can be traced back to 5 main mistakes. I have those listed as 95 to 99, which are also pieces 83.1 to 83.5. But since they're such important pieces of the puzzle, I wanted to give them whole numbers to themselves. So when I created my numbering system, when I started grouping pieces to the puzzle, I had all these interconnecting puzzles. I'd always group things in all these different puzzles, and I would give each one of those puzzles its own numbering system. But then I wanted to arrange all those puzzles, I want to interconnect them, which is what I did with my special teaching tool. And then after I finally looked at it and realized which of the pieces I wanted to identify, I then went back and gave it a universal numbering system because I wanted to make it simple. That's why I've only gave 120 pieces to whole numbers. So when I went back and did that, I realized, oh my God, I don't want to put cooked food as a sub number. I don't want to put the art of cooking as a sub number. So 95 is cooking, 46 is the art of cooking, or the false belief that cooking is an art when it's actually the sin, the original sin. As I mentioned over and over in my videos, of all the knowledge we need, the only knowledge we need is knowledge of how to live. So when we go back to the Trivium and Quadrivium deception, we see that Paul attacked the truth. And these people were worshiping Satan back then, and they wanted us to eat animals. Another connection to this, and that ties into this, if we come over here to my file on Eustace Mullins file, you'll notice that a book he wrote back in 1987 is called The Curse of Canaan. In the preface to this book, he came out and said, after 40 years of patient study of the crises which faces humanity, I arrived at a very simple conclusion. All conspiracies are satanic. So again, this ties into what Paul was trying to do by promoting meat eating. That's what the Satanists wanted. So here's another connection that ties everything together. What's also interesting, if we go back to Mullins' file one more time, the book he wrote in the following year in 1988, Murder by Injection, the foreword to that book was very similar. After 40 years, after studying all these factors, I realized that I found that only one group has the power to issue life or death sentences to any American. It's even greater than the hidden rulers. And that power lies with our nation's physicians. Once again, everything in our society of any significance has everything to do with our health. So when we look at the piece numbers I've shown you guys already, the first piece number is the truth being attacked by Paul. Going back to Eustace Mullins, he claims that the people who rule the world have been doing it for a long time. They usurped the priesthood and the educational systems over 3,000 years ago. So remember, when we look at new knowledge, if we're going to take the best of the trivium, we have to be open-minded. We've got to be able to entertain various ideas without necessarily embracing them. We want to hold at least two possibilities in a brain at the same time. We want the wisdom of a Buddhist, one might say, so that we can consider the possibility that the books we thought were perfect might not be perfect, and they are used to control us. That's how controlled opposition works. They infiltrate movements to change the message, and instead of promoting raw food, they're promoting eating animals. So when it comes to using the trivium, we have to, number one, open up our mind. Number two, we've got to arrange knowledge in a special order. Number three, we want to use logic. Now, when I created my special teaching tool, I got really excited about this tool. And I decided to start seeing if I could punch holes in different theories. And I've always wanted to take a closer look at the I Ching, but was reluctant to because I thought that it would probably be at least a 50 to maybe even 100-hour project to evaluate it intensively and extensively and learn everything I need to know. It only took me several hours to find someone that gave me the information I was looking for, and as soon as I found it, I saw the flaw immediately. And that got me excited. I said, okay, now let me take a look at Aristotle. Aristotle is the father of logic, so let me take a look at what Aristotle says. When I went to look at Aristotle to see if I could punch holes in what Aristotle said, I realized, oh my God, we're on the exact same page. Without having studied Aristotle, just by using what I knew was the most important piece of the puzzle and trying to make sense out of everything, I came to the same exact conclusions that Aristotle did. That there's two forms of two-value logic we need in order to solve problems. Ordered pairs and polar opposites. Everything else is a distraction. So when you go back to my special teaching tool, the very first quadrant system I created was a cause and effect and pleasure and pain quadrant system. And I tried to explain everything by putting all the pieces to the story in these 4 boxes, only to find I couldn't do it. And why was that? Because there were 2 more boxes that I didn't have onto it. And then when I tried to tell my story using these 6 boxes, I found I can't put all the pieces in those, because out of the 281 pieces I identified, 69 of them are in the 18 portals. Now, of those 69 pieces, 53 are in the 2 portals we have to go through to solve our problems. Those are where our obstacles are at. The other 16 pieces are in the other 16 portals. Now, we don't need to know all of this. In fact, there are a total of 55 problems of knowledge. The other 2 problems of knowledge would be piece number 1, the knowledge we're missing, and piece number 2, the false knowledge we have in its place, especially pieces 46 to 50, especially piece 46, the art of cooking, because that's the fall of mankind. And then we have the 40 pieces that are in the first doorway and the 13 pieces in the second doorway. And of all those 55 problems of knowledge, there's only one of them we have to focus on. And that's where the first of my 3-step process comes into play. That's where we test an idea whose time is come. So once again, we use book 3, chapter 7 in Aristotle's Rhetoric for the rhetoric. We use my special teaching tool to arrange all the information for the grammar. We use my special teaching tool to show the logical fallacies, or the invalid structure in the systems that are in charge, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And then we use my 3-step process for the informal fallacies, or the logical fallacies. So let's go back to my special teaching tool. Remember the 3 ways to screw up the law of cause and effect. The first way we screw up the law of cause and effect is when we don't have the knowledge of how to live that precedes the cause in the second stage of knowledge. And then the other way we can screw up the law of cause and effect is when we don't know what comes after the effect. And that's where we have knowledge of how to adapt. So those are 2 ways we can screw up the law of cause and effect. The third way we screw up the law of cause and effect is when we put our so-called experts in this doorway right here. That's piece 106. That's where we put allopathic doctors. They interfere with the body's communication process. Remember, if we go back to the 3 stages of knowledge, cause and effect is the second and third stage. The third stage is our feedback system. So what do allopathic doctors do? They interfere with our body's feedback system, which gives the illusion that the problems have gone away. This is how we know they're not the solution. So we want to use logic to prove what works and what doesn't. There's 2 tests that have to be passed. You don't start with logical fallacies in the contents. You start with the invalid structure. Once again, you never look for logical fallacies in systems with invalid structure. So the first test you give people is to make sure they passed the valid structure test. Are they putting the cart before the horse? Are they guilty of monus ponens? And what you're going to find is the people in charge are guilty of monus ponens. They're treating symptoms for problems that are 100% within their control. The problem here is we lack the wisdom to know the difference between a problem that's within our control and outside our control. And then that brings you, or all of us, to my 3-step process. How do we find the logical fallacies? There's too many pieces. There's too many logical fallacies. There's only one way, my friends, to deal with the logical fallacies, and that is to do the first of my 3-step process. That's where we test an idea as time has come. That's where out of all these 55 problems of knowledge, we deal with piece 54.5. That's where we want to apply knowledge. And we don't have to know it or believe it to apply it. We can test an idea as time has come. So folks, it's time to get excited. It's time to do the first of my 3-step process. You can go down below in the description box and you'll see a link to my first step, as well as a link to a solid food vacation playlist, which will tell you everything you need to know. And in my follow-up video, in my next video, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at all those people we considered initially as to whether or not they might be controlled opposition. And to do that, we're going to see if they pass a certain test. Remember, there's 2 tests for logic, and then there's 1 test to see if people are part of controlled opposition or not. And that's what we'll be doing the next time. So it's time to get excited, my friends. It's time to test an idea as time has come. And stay tuned for my next one, because when you can identify controlled opposition, then you can use controlled opposition. You can take the good and leave the bad. And when we can do that, we're in for a treat.